Welcome to the Nonfiction Insights channel. Today we're diving deep into Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. It's a book that really makes you reconsider how our species, Homo sapiens, came to be the dominant player on this planet.
It really does. Big questions.
Absolutely. Our goal in this deep dive is to pull out the most significant ideas from this, sweeping history, focusing on how shared beliefs have shaped us and the surprising twists in our journey. Let's jump right in. One of the first things Harari points out is that for most of human history, we weren't alone.
That's right. It's a common picture to have this linear idea of human evolution, one species neatly leading to the next, like a biological relay race with us crossing the finish line. But Harari is keen to, dismantle that image.
Yeah, he really pushes back on that.
Up until about 10,000 years ago, Earth was home to several different human species living side by side.
He even calls it a misunderstanding, to think of it as Homo ergaster, then Homo erectus, then Neanderthals, then us. It wasn't a straight shot. It was more like a diverse family gathering.
Exactly.
He highlights that for a huge stretch of time, multiple human species were all walking the Earth simultaneously. Think about it. We have multiple species of bears or foxes today. Why assume humans were ever different?
Exactly. Around 100,000 years ago, there were at least 6 different human species coexisting. It makes our current situation, where Homo sapiens is the only one left, seem quite unusual in the grand scheme of things. Harari even suggests we might subconsciously avoid dwelling on our former siblings. What does it mean that human once encompassed such variety? How does that, shift our perspective on who we are now?
That's a fascinating point. If we consider that for vast periods, being human meant being part of a much larger, more diverse group, does it challenge our sense of being special or unique?
Good question.
Could it suggest that our current dominance wasn't inevitable, but rather the result of specific historical events?
Precisely. Which leads us to a key question. How did Homo sapiens not just survive, but thrive and become the sole human species? Harari argues a major factor was our ability to cooperate in large numbers.
Cooperation.
Small groups, maybe up to 150 people or so, can work together based on personal relationships and direct trust, like a close-knit village.
Right, like he uses the example of family businesses often struggling to expand beyond a certain size. You can't run a global corporation based purely on knowing everyone personally.
Which just doesn't scale, right? But Homo sapiens figured out how to scale up cooperation dramatically, leading to the formation of cities and eventually empires with millions of individuals. And Harari posits that the key to this leap was the development of what he terms fiction.
Fiction. Okay, that might sound a bit misleading, but he's not talking about deliberate lies, is he? What kind of fictions are we discussing here?
Well, think of them as shared stories or imagined realities that large groups of people collectively accept as true. He gives compelling examples. Religions, for instance, are built on common religious myths.
Okay.
2 Catholics who have never met can join forces on a crusade because they share a fundamental belief in God and the teachings of the Church.
Okay, that makes sense. A shared faith creates a powerful bond and a common purpose, even among strangers. What other kinds of fictions does he highlight?
Nations are held together by shared national myths. 2 people from the same country who have never encountered each other might feel a sense of loyalty and be willing to help each other because they both believe in the existence and importance of their nation.
Right.
Similarly, our legal systems rely on shared legal myths. Lawyers who don't know each other can work together to defend a client based on a mutual belief in the rule of law and the principles of justice.
So these huge systems that organize our world, religions, nations, legal frameworks, they only function because we as a collective believe in these underlying stories. Things like gods, nations, money, human rights. They don't have a physical existence outside of our shared belief.
That's the crux of it. Harari's argument is that these concepts are powerful precisely because we believe in them and act as if they're objectively real.
He even draws a parallel between ancient people believing in spirits and our modern faith in things like corporations. That's a pretty mind-blowing comparison.
It is. He essentially suggests that modern business people and lawyers are like sophisticated storytellers, using the legend of Peugeot as an illustration.
The car company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Peugeot Corporation exists as a legal entity, a story we collectively agree to treat as real, allowing it to own factories, employ people, and operate within the economy. It's a fiction that has very real consequences.
Wow. So this unique ability to create and subscribe to these shared fictions is what allowed Homo sapiens to achieve unprecedented levels of cooperation, setting us apart from other human species. Now, he emphasizes the difference between these imagined realities and simple lies. Why is that distinction so important?
This is a crucial point for understanding Harari's argument. A lie is a conscious misrepresentation of reality, like one monkey deceiving another about the presence of a predator to steal food. It's about individual intent to mislead regarding an objective fact.
Right. It's a deliberate attempt to trick someone about something that is actually true or false in the physical world.
Exactly. But an imagined reality is different because it's collectively believed. It's not about individual deception, but about shared understanding.
Okay.
The statal cave lion man, the concept of money, the existence of companies, the idea of human rights, these aren't lies because vast numbers of people genuinely believe in them, and this shared belief shapes their actions and the world around them.
So when the UN calls on a country to uphold human rights, even though human rights aren't a tangible thing you can touch, it's acting based on these widely accepted fictions that carry significant real-world weight.
That's the core idea. Since the cognitive revolution, sapiens have essentially lived in a dual reality. The objective world of nature, trees, rivers, animals, and the imagined reality of our beliefs, gods, nations, corporations.
Two worlds at once.
And increasingly, Harari notes, the fate of the objective world is intertwined with these imagined entities. Think of environmental laws enforced by governments or conservation efforts driven by organizations.
This concept of imagined reality really illuminates how societies function. What happens when belief in one of these realities starts to erode?
That's when you can see significant social and political instability. If people lose faith in the stories that underpin their political system, their economic structures, or their religious institutions, those systems can weaken and potentially be replaced by new imagined realities that gain broader acceptance.
Like revolutions.
Think about periods of revolution or significant social upheaval. They often involve a fundamental shift in the dominant narratives.
Okay. Before agriculture, the world was populated by numerous forager cultures. How does this idea of shared fictions relate to the incredible diversity of these early societies?
Well, Harari emphasizes that the cognitive revolution, with the advent of this ability to create and believe in fictions, led to an explosion of cultural diversity among forager bands.
An explosion?
Yeah. Even with similar genetic makeup and living in comparable environments, different groups of foragers could develop vastly different imagined realities, resulting in distinct languages, social norms, and values. He estimates that millions of foragers lived in thousands of separate tribes, each with its own unique cultural identity.
It's hard to even picture that level of cultural variation compared to the more interconnected world we inhabit today. Now, there's an ongoing discussion about whether these early forager societies were generally peaceful or prone to conflict. What's Harari's take on that?
He points out that it's a complex issue with conflicting perspectives. Some argue that early hunter-gatherers lived in relative harmony, and that large-scale warfare only emerged with the development of agriculture and the accumulation of resources.
The noble, savage idea, kind of.
It's sort of, yeah. Others contend that the forager world was actually quite violent.
And he highlights that drawing definitive conclusions is difficult because the evidence from that distant past is limited and open to interpretation.
Exactly. Anthropological studies of modern forager groups can be problematic because these groups often live in marginalized areas and are influenced by modern states.
Right. They're not isolated snapshots of the past.
No. And historical accounts of larger independent forager populations in places like North America and Australia did document frequent conflicts, but it's hard to say if that reflects a universal condition or the impact of later developments like colonization.
What about archaeological evidence? Surely we can find clear signs of ancient warfare, like weapons, skeletons.
Surprisingly, direct archaeological evidence of large-scale battles from the pre-agricultural period is scarce and often ambiguous. Things like spear points could have been used for hunting, and bone fractures could result from accidents. Furthermore, in pre-industrial warfare, the majority of deaths often resulted from factors like starvation, disease, and exposure following a conflict, which might not leave easily identifiable archaeological traces of the battle itself.
So it's tough to say definitively how common war was in early forager societies.
Yeah.
But how might these imagined realities have played a role in both fostering cooperation within groups and potentially leading to conflict between them?
It's quite likely that shared beliefs would have created strong internal bonds and facilitated cooperation within a tribe. However, those same beliefs could also have created distinctions and potential friction with other groups who held different imagined realities.
Us versus them.
Basically. Different origin myths, different views on territory, different sets of values, these could all contribute to intergroup tensions.
Now, let's shift our focus a bit. Harari also discusses the impact Homo sapiens had on other species as we spread across the globe. It's not a particularly flattering picture, is it?
No, it's a rather sobering part of the story. Harari uses the extinction of Australia's megafauna around 45,000 years ago as a prime example. Large animals like giant kangaroos and massive flightless birds disappeared relatively soon after the arrival of Homo sapiens.
Just gone. And there are a few main theories trying to explain this rapid extinction event.
3 primary explanations are often cited. The first is intensive hunting by the new human arrivals. The second is the practice of fire stick farming, where humans deliberately burn vegetation, dramatically altering the landscape and ecosystem.
Reshaping the whole environment.
Definitely. And the third factor is the climate change that was occurring around the same period.
So it wasn't likely just one single cause. A perfect storm, maybe.
Harari suggests that the combination of climate change making the environment more fragile and the arrival of human hunters with their sophisticated hunting techniques likely proved to be a devastating combination for many of these large animal species.
Yeah.
It's often the synergy of multiple pressures that leads to extinctions.
It serves as a stark reminder of our species' early impact on the planet. Does this historical event offer any lessons for our impact on biodiversity today?
Absolutely. The rapid disappearance of Australia's megafauna provides a historical precedent for how quickly Homo sapiens can reshape ecosystems and drive other species to extinction.
The parallels are pretty clear.
Yeah, there are clear parallels to the biodiversity crisis we are currently facing, with human activities like habitat destruction, pollution, and climate change leading to widespread species loss. It raises the question of whether we've truly learned from these ancient patterns.
A sobering question indeed. In a fascinating turn, Harari then discusses the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, this incredibly old and monumental complex built by foragers.
Yeah.
How does this discovery challenge our traditional understanding of pre-agricultural societies?
Göbekli Tepe, which dates back around 12,000 years, is a truly remarkable site. These massive stone structures were erected by societies that hadn't yet adopted settled agriculture.
Before farming. That's wild.
Exactly. They don't appear to have served any obvious practical purpose like shelter or defense. This suggests that forager societies were capable of complex social organization and had sophisticated belief systems that could bring together large numbers of people for extended periods of cooperative effort.
It really goes against the conventional image of nomadic foragers just focused on day-to-day survival, doesn't it? Like building massive monuments wasn't supposed to happen yet.
Precisely. It implies a level of social and symbolic complexity that we previously didn't attribute to pre-agricultural societies. The fact that thousands of foragers from different bands likely collaborated to build and maintain Göbekli Tepe highlights the power of shared beliefs to drive large-scale projects even before the advent of settled farming.
The power of fiction. Again.
You got it. And there's a potentially significant connection to the origins of agriculture in that region, isn't there?
Oh, how so?
Yes. Göbekli Tepe is located near the Karasadag Hills, which is considered to be the origin point for at least one domesticated variety of wheat, einkorn.
Right near where wheat was first domesticated. Interesting.
This geographical proximity suggests a possible link between the development of these complex social and religious structures and the later emergence of agriculture in the same area. It's conceivable that the social needs and shared beliefs that motivated the construction of Göbekli Tepe may have also played a role in the shift towards settled farming practices. Maybe the need to feed the builders.
That's a really interesting potential link. So we've seen how these imagined orders are incredibly powerful in shaping human behavior and society. But how do these orders actually get established and maintained over time? How do you convince people to believe in something like Christianity or democracy or capitalism?
Harari outlines a couple of key mechanisms. First, you never openly acknowledge that the order is a human construct, an imagined reality.
Don't admit it's made up.
Right. Instead, you consistently present it as an objective reality, something that was either ordained by gods or dictated by the immutable laws of nature. Think about historical claims of rulers having a divine right to govern.
Like the mandate of heaven or kings appointed by God.
Exactly. Or modern arguments that free markets are simply the natural and most efficient way for economies to function.
So it's about framing these human-created systems as something fundamental and beyond human invention, rather than just a set of agreed-upon rules.
Exactly. The second crucial mechanism is constant education and reinforcement from a very young age. The principles and values of the imagined order are woven into everything: our stories, our art, our etiquette, our political messaging, even the design of our buildings and the clothes we wear.
He uses the example of wealthy individuals wearing jeans, originally working-class attire, as a reflection of a modern belief in equality, contrasting it with the rigid, class-based dress codes of the Middle Ages.
That's a great illustration of how even seemingly minor things like fashion can reflect deeper underlying beliefs about the social order. And Harari also points out that the humanities and social sciences, to a large extent, dedicate themselves to explaining, interpreting, and ultimately reinforcing these very imagined orders.
So like history, economics, sociology, they're partly about understanding these fictions.
In a way, yes. Explaining how they work, why they matter, how they came to be.
It really makes you think about all the subtle and not so subtle ways we are constantly being taught and reminded about the dominant values and structures of our society. What happens when people begin to question these seemingly fixed imagined orders?
That's when you can see periods of significant social and political transformation. When the underlying beliefs that hold an imagined order together weaken or are challenged by new ideas, the entire structure can be questioned, leading to calls for reform or even revolutionary change.
Like the Enlightenment or the Civil Rights Movement.
Exactly. Think about historical periods of major social change. They often involve a fundamental reevaluation and redefinition of the prevailing imagined realities.
Finally, Harari touches upon the question of whether history has a discernible direction. Does he believe there's an overall trajectory to human history? Or is it just one thing after another?
At a very high level, he suggests a general trend of smaller, simpler cultural units gradually merging into larger, more complex civilizations, resulting in fewer but more expansive megacultures. He sees a long-term movement towards greater interconnectedness and a degree of unification.
Even considering all the conflicts and division that we've witnessed throughout history, like empires rising and falling.
Yes, he acknowledges that there have been periods of fragmentation and reversal, like the collapse of empires or the splits within major religions. However, he argues that when viewed from a long-term perspective, these often appear as temporary setbacks in an overall movement towards greater global unity.
So you zoom out far enough.
Right. It really depends on the scale at which you're observing history. Zoomed in, it looks chaotic. Zoomed out, maybe there's a pattern.
It's a bold claim. Do you agree with the idea that history shows a general movement towards global unity, or is that too simplistic?
It's certainly a provocative and thought-provoking perspective. When you consider the rise of global trade, international organizations, and the increasing interconnectedness facilitated by technology, you can see some evidence supporting this idea.
Yeah, the internet, global economy.
But, the persistent forces of nationalism, regional conflicts, and cultural differences also present significant counter-arguments. It's definitely a topic that continues to be debated as history unfolds. It's not a straight line, that's for sure.
Harari's exploration in Sapiens truly highlights the extraordinary power of our shared beliefs to shape not only our societies but the entire course of our history. Considering how fundamental these imagined realities are to both our successes and our challenges, it really makes you wonder what the next major fiction might be that fundamentally reshapes human society on a global scale.
Yeah. What's the next big story?
It's a truly fascinating thought to ponder as the story of humankind continues to unfold.
Indeed. It encourages us to think critically about the stories we tell ourselves and the immense influence they have on the world we inhabit.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us into Sapiens. We hope this exploration has offered you, the learner, some valuable new perspectives.
Remember, this was just a brief look at the wealth of ideas contained in Harari's book. We highly recommend exploring the full text to delve even deeper into these concepts. There's so much more in there.
Please subscribe to the Nonfiction Insights channel for more in-depth analyses of fascinating nonfiction works.